I'm not even sure where to start with this because honestly, it feels like my whole world just flipped upside down in one day. I always thought Sarah was the kind of woman who knew how to keep her shit together, who was sharp and confident, and, most importantly, loyal. We've been married for about 5 years now, and until recently, I genuinely believed we had a good thing going. Sure, we had our disagreements, but who does? Nothing prepared me for what I found out at the company's IPO celebration last month. It all started with that event. The company I work for was finally going public, and it was supposed to be a huge deal, our moment to shine. I'd spent weeks preparing for interviews, making sure everything was perfect. Sarah had been oddly distant in the weeks leading up to it, but I brushed it off as her being busy with her own stuff. She's always been somewhat bitchy. She can be a real nightmare when she's in a bad mood, but I never thought it was anything more than her usual drama. She told me she was excited about the IPO, that she was proud of me, and that she wanted to celebrate afterward. The night of the event, I was feeling a mix of pride and nerves. I was giving a few interviews, chatting with investors, and trying to make sure everything went smoothly. Meanwhile, Sarah was supposed to be mingling with other business contacts, securing connections. She kept saying. That's what she told me over the phone as I was getting ready, like it was some noble mission. But something felt off. She had this weird energy, like she was hiding something. She kept texting me, but it was mostly vague, just little updates that didn't quite add up. Then came the moment I'll never forget. I went to the bathroom after my last interview, needing a quick break before the final pitch. As I stepped into the executive bathroom, yeah, the fancy one tucked away in the corner, I noticed something. The door was slightly ajar, which was strange because I always knew when it was in use. I pushed it open and froze. There, in the most humiliating, gut-wrenching scene you could imagine, was Sarah. She was on her knees, and I recognized immediately who she was with. John Carter, our company's top mentor, the guy who's supposed to be guiding us through this IPO. I couldn't believe my eyes. The sight of her with this man, who's practically a father figure to me professionally, was like a punch to the chest. I saw their shoes next to the sink, her heels and his loafers, then their bodies pressed close together. I could hear muffled voices. They didn't even bother to hide it. They were too busy being caught up in whatever sick game they were playing. Sarah's bitchy attitude, which I'd always dismissed as her being difficult, suddenly made sense. She'd been lying all along about not seeing him outside work, about how their meetings were strictly professional. But the security logs told a different story. They'd been meeting regularly, sometimes late at night, always under the guise of discussing business. I felt a mixture of rage, disbelief, and heartbreak so intense I thought I might break apart. I didn't say a word. I just turned around and walked out of there, leaving the door open behind me. I knew I needed to process this before confronting her. My mind was racing. How many times had she been lying? How long had she been sneaking around with him? All those business meetings she insisted she had, were they just excuses? It was almost surreal. She acted so innocent when I confronted her later, like I was overreacting or imagining things. She said, "You're crazy, Mike. You're paranoid. Maybe I just talked to him about work and you're blowing it out of proportion." But I knew better. I had seen enough. And this was just the tip of the iceberg. The way she lied, the way she played innocent. She's a bitch when she's caught, and she's really good at spinning stories. I couldn't believe I had been blind for so long. That was the night my world shifted. I don't even know why I'm writing this now, but I guess I need to get it out. I feel betrayed on every level by her, by the man I once trusted as a mentor, and by myself for not seeing it sooner. I don't have the full plan yet, but I know I can't just pretend it didn't happen. I have to decide what comes next. After that night, everything changed. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, and I found myself staring at my phone, thinking about what it all meant. I replayed the scene in the bathroom over and over, trying to process what I'd seen. Every time I remembered Sarah's face, her smirk, her dismissive attitude, I felt a fresh wave of anger. She always had a way of acting like she was better than everyone, especially me, like she was entitled to do whatever she wanted. Well, now I knew. She wasn't the innocent wife I thought she was. She was a lying, manipulative bitch, sneaking around with a man who was supposed to be guiding us professionally but clearly was more interested in her than business. The next day was a nightmare. I was supposed to be at work, but I couldn't focus. Every noise, every message from colleagues felt like a punch to the gut. I kept thinking about her, about how she always put on this sweet, bitchy act, how she'd lie through her teeth to cover her tracks. I decided I had to confront her, but I didn't want to do it outright. I needed to gather more evidence, see if I was imagining things or if this was real. Over the next few days, I started watching her more closely. She became even more defensive, trying to brush off questions. She'd snap at me whenever I mentioned her business meetings or her contacts, and I noticed her phone constantly buzzing. She'd hide her messages, hide her calls, and I learned to catch snippets, texts that she'd delete quickly, conversations that sounded suspiciously flirtatious. I even found she'd been meeting him outside work, in places she claimed she never went. The more I dug, the more I realized this was no coincidence. They'd been sneaking around for months, and I was just the idiot who never saw it. One night, I finally sat her down and pushed for answers. I told her I'd seen her with John Carter, that I knew they'd been meeting privately. That's when she went ballistic. She looked at me like I was the crazy one, like I was accusing her of something she hadn't done. She told me I was paranoid, that I was overreacting, that I had no proof. She even called me jealous and possessive, which made me want to scream. I told her I wasn't jealous. I was furious because she'd lied to me, betrayed my trust, and humiliated me in front of everyone. Her reaction was totally bitchy. She started yelling, calling me insecure and accusing me of spying on her because I couldn't handle her success. She said stuff like, "You're just mad I'm more interesting than your boring-ass work. You think I'm just gonna sit around waiting for you to get your act together." That's when I realized she'd been playing me this whole time, that her securing business connections was just her cover story. She was sneaking around with him, probably for a long time, and she didn't give a damn about my feelings. Honestly, I felt crushed. All the trust I'd built up over the years was gone in an instant. I kept asking myself how I missed the signs, how I let her treat me like this. The worst part was feeling so helpless, like I was just supposed to accept her lies and move on. But I knew I couldn't. Something had to give. I told her she needed to leave, that I couldn't stay with someone who'd betray me like this. She scoffed, called me pathetic, and told me I was overreacting again. That's when I realized I was dealing with a master manipulator who wasn't going to admit fault anytime soon. That night I stayed up all night going over everything, trying to make sense of it. I was angry, hurt, and confused. I kept asking myself why she did it. Why she'd risk everything for some affair in the bathroom while I was out giving interviews, working my ass off. It was a betrayal I don't think I'll ever get over, but I also knew I had to decide what to do next. Do I forgive her? Do I kick her out? Do I fight for this marriage? I didn't have answers yet, only a sinking feeling that my life would never be the same again. Over the next few days, I found myself caught in a whirlwind of emotions, a mix of anger, sadness, and a helpless sense of betrayal that I couldn't shake off. I spent hours every night staring at the ceiling, replaying everything I'd uncovered. The more I thought about Sarah and John Carter, the more I realized I'd been a complete idiot for trusting her blindly. She'd always been so bitchy, so difficult, but I never thought she'd stoop so low. It was like she had two faces, one that was sweet and manipulative, and another that was cold and calculating. One thing that kept gnawing at me was her constant lies. She insisted she was securing business connections during the IPO celebration, but her phone logs told a different story. They met in secret multiple times, in places she claimed she'd never been. And the fact that she lied so convincingly about it made me realize just how good she was at hiding her true self. I felt like a fool for ever trusting her, for ever thinking we had a real connection. I decided I could no longer keep quiet. I needed to confront her again, this time with everything I'd gathered. I told her I knew about her meetings, about her lies, and I demanded the truth. That's when she really lost her shit. She started screaming, calling me paranoid, insecure, and saying I was just jealous because she was more successful than me. That comment hit me hard. It was like a slap in the face. Her trying to turn it around made me feel like I was the problem. But I knew better. I'd seen her in action, seen her manipulate everyone around her. Her reaction only confirmed what I'd suspected. She was a manipulative, bitchy woman who didn't give a damn about my feelings. She kept insisting that everything was a misunderstanding, that I was overreacting, and that I needed to grow up and stop being so insecure. When I called her out on the fact that she'd been lying, she threw her hands up and said, "You're just jealous of John. He's the reason our company's successful, not you." That was a new low. I had never thought she'd be so petty, so cruel. It made me realize she'd been living in some fantasy world where she was the victim and she could do whatever she wanted. After that confrontation, I felt drained. I knew I couldn't keep pretending everything was normal. I kept asking myself if I should leave her, if I could even trust her again after this. The truth was, I didn't want to lose my marriage, but I also didn't want to be a fool anymore. I was angry at her for lying, angry at myself for not seeing it sooner, and mostly I was devastated that someone I loved so much could betray me so completely. I started to think about my options. I could kick her out, file for divorce, and move on. Or I could try to work things out, maybe get counseling or whatever. Honestly, the thought of staying with her, knowing what I now knew, made me sick. But I also felt a strange sense of guilt. Did I push her into cheating? Was I not enough? The truth is, I don't think I'll ever understand her motives. She's a bitchy, manipulative woman who's good at hiding her true nature, and I've learned my lesson the hard way. Trust is fragile and betrayal cuts deep. That night, I finally decided I was done pretending. I called a lawyer and made plans to separate. I knew it wouldn't be easy. Things like divorce are complicated, especially when there's betrayal involved. But I couldn't keep living in this nightmare. Every time I looked at her, I felt the anger boil inside me. I guess I always knew she was selfish and bitchy, but I never thought she'd cheat on me with my own mentor during such a huge moment in my career. That's the kind of betrayal that leaves scars, and I know I'll carry this pain for a long time. The days that followed were some of the darkest I've ever experienced. I spent most of my time locked in my apartment trying to piece together everything. The betrayal ran so deep I almost couldn't breathe. I kept thinking about the moments I'd trusted her, the times I'd been proud of her, and how all of it had been a lie. Seeing her act bitchy and dismissive so many times suddenly made sense. That sneering attitude, the way she always had an excuse ready, she'd been hiding this affair for months, probably longer. I remember how she tried to act like nothing was wrong whenever I brought up our future plans, like everything was fine. But I knew better. I could see the guilt in her eyes, the way she'd dodge my questions, the way she'd look away when I mentioned John. I started noticing small things, her phone ringing at odd hours, her deleting messages, her avoiding me when I looked at her too long. It all added up, and I felt like I was losing my mind trying to hold onto the last shreds of trust. One night, I finally decided to turn the tables. I had to get some concrete proof, something that would stop her from denying everything. I set up a hidden app on her phone, one that tracked messages and calls. It was a little risky, but I needed answers. The next morning, I checked it, and what I saw made my stomach turn. Dozens of texts from John, full of flirtatious crap, promising to meet her again, talking about how good it felt, securing their future, and even explicit stuff. She told me she'd only met him professionally, but the logs said otherwise. My heart felt like it was being ripped apart. I knew I had to confront her again. But this time I was ready. I wanted her to see that I wasn't just some naive husband anymore. I wanted her to know I'd uncovered everything. So when she got home that evening, I told her I knew about her messages, her meetings, everything. I made her sit down and listen to me. Her face went pale, then she started to get bitchy, trying to put on her innocent face, claiming I was lying, that I was paranoid. But I had the proof. I felt a strange mixture of victory and disgust. Her reaction was classic. She started yelling, calling me crazy, jealous, and possessive. She accused me of just wanting to control her, like I was some jealous boyfriend instead of her husband. She even had the audacity to say, "You're just mad I'm better looking than you and more successful," as if that somehow justified her cheating. I wanted to punch her in the face for her bitchy attitude, but I managed to stay calm, barely. I told her she had to leave, that I couldn't live with someone so manipulative and unfaithful. That was when she finally lost her composure and stormed out, screaming that I was a controlling, insecure loser, and that I'd never find anyone who put up with me. That night I was a wreck. I'd never felt so low. All the trust, all the love I'd given her had been a lie. I felt stupid for ever believing in the fairy tale, but I also felt a strange sense of clarity. This was the end of our marriage, at least as I knew it. I knew I had to get out of this toxic situation, no matter how much it hurt. The pain of betrayal was like a weight on my chest, but I knew I couldn't keep living in denial. The next step was clear. I had to lawyer up, file for divorce, and start rebuilding my life from scratch. I just hoped I had the strength to do it. The process of separation hit me harder than I expected. I went to see a lawyer, and suddenly my world shrank even more. All the documents, the legal jargon, the financials, they don't tell the emotional story, but they sure make it real. Sarah didn't fight me much on the divorce. She just threw her bitchy attitude around, claiming I was ruining everything, that I was overreacting and trying to control her. She kept insisting she didn't do anything wrong, that she was just testing boundaries, and that I was too insecure to handle her success. I wanted to punch her, honestly. The hardest part was the realization that I had to let her go, that I had to accept she was never the woman I thought she was. Every memory, every moment of happiness, now felt tainted by her lies and betrayal. I kept asking myself how I missed all the signs, how I'd been so blind to her bitchy, manipulative side. I kept replaying her words, her excuses, her fake tears, and I wondered how I'd ever trusted her again. Truth is, I felt so betrayed I almost didn't recognize myself. I was angry, hurt, but mostly numb, like I'd been punched in the stomach and told to move on. In the meantime, I started to focus on myself. I threw myself back into work, trying to drown out the pain with late nights and extra hours. But at the same time, I began to realize how much her betrayal had affected me. I couldn't sleep, constantly thinking about her and John Carter. The image of her in that bathroom, kneeling, then smirking after, haunted me. I felt stupid for ever trusting her, for ever believing she was loyal. It was like I'd been fooled by a master manipulator, and I'd never see her the same way again. One day, during a meeting, I caught myself thinking about her, about how she'd lied, about how she'd used me. I felt a surge of anger and grief all at once. I knew I had to make a decision, whether to try to move on or to keep chasing after some illusion of what we had. Honestly, I think I'd already made up my mind. I was done. Done with her lies, done with this sick game she played. The divorce was moving forward, and I was preparing myself for the long road ahead. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I also knew I couldn't keep living in this hell. The pain of betrayal still lingers. Every time I see her bitchy smirk, I remember how she lied about everything, how she betrayed my trust for some cheap affair. But I also feel a strange sense of relief, like I finally saw her for who she really was. I just hope I can rebuild my life and forget the girl who shattered it in the worst way possible. Because honestly, at this point, I don't even know if I want her back or if I'll ever fully trust anyone again. All I know is that I'm tired of being betrayed by the person I loved. Now, sitting here reflecting on everything, I realize how much this all changed me. I used to be someone who believed in honesty, loyalty, and the idea that love could conquer all. But betrayal like this cuts so deep, it leaves scars that don't fade easily. I've learned the hard way that some people, especially the ones you trust most, can be the biggest liars and manipulators. Sarah was one of those people. She played her games, hid her true nature behind a bitchy smile, and betrayed me so thoroughly I don't think I'll ever forget it. Looking back, I see that she was never the woman I thought she was. She used her charm, her bitchy attitude, and her lies to manipulate everyone around her, me included. That securing business connections excuse, just a cover. The meetings, the texts, the secret meetings in the bathroom, those were the real deal, and I was too blind or too naive to see it. Maybe I didn't want to see it. Maybe I was too in love to accept that she was capable of such treachery. The divorce is finalized now, and honestly, it's a relief. I feel lighter, even if the pain still lingers. I've started to rebuild my confidence, focus on my work, and reconnect with friends. The betrayal taught me a hard lesson about trust, about how some people will use and hurt you without a second thought. If I could give anyone advice, it would be this. Don't ever ignore the signs and don't let anyone make you feel less than you are. Trust is fragile and once broken, it's almost impossible to repair. I've come to accept that this is part of my story now. It's what made me stronger, more cautious, yes, but also more aware. I won't let her or her betrayal define me. I'll move on, learn from this, and hopefully find someone who's worthy of my trust and love. As for Sarah, I hope she gets whatever karma she deserves. She's a bitchy, manipulative woman who thought she could get away with her lies forever, but the truth always catches up. This experience has taught me that revenge isn't about hurting someone back, it's about reclaiming your own peace. I'm finally starting to do that. I'll never forget what she did, but I'm learning to live with it. I'll be okay. Better than okay. Because I deserve better than a lying, cheating bitch who only cared about herself. And I hope anyone going through something similar finds the strength to walk away and never look back. Trust me, it hurts like hell, but it's better to be alone than to stay in a toxic, deceitful relationship. Whatever comes next, I'm ready for it now. Wiser, stronger, and finally free.